what people don't seem to be able to do is take these Lego bricks and use them to build something of their own. That's what happens when you get stuck in this tutorial hell, where it's like, okay, I can only arrange these Lego bricks one way, and that is the way that this person doing the tutorial has actually shown me. And so, in order to get more out of coding tutorials, you should stop fixating on what the implementation is or what the example is that the person is trying to demo this to you with. And instead, you should focus on what are the building blocks that they are trying to teach me about. And once you change that mindset, you can actually use those building blocks for other things. I'm sure everybody has heard the memes about tutorial hell, which is basically where you spend 2 hours watching a coding tutorial, and at the end of it, you come away with pretty much nothing learned, and you literally just have like a copy paste implementation of whatever the person doing the tutorial was trying to show you, whether that's like a Twitter clone or whatever. And I've done heaps of coding tutorials on this YouTube channel over the last 2 years, and I want to talk about this problem, which is the artist formerly known as Tutorial Hell has now simply become the AI generated code hell, where we have this pervasive pattern of people doing stuff or like building stuff to try and learn, yet they don't actually learn. And so we saw this before with coding tutorial videos, and now the coding tutorial videos are going a little bit out of fashion. People are doing it with AI code, and this has been covered by other content creators as well. And I've actually noticed this recently because, of course, I've done a lot of coding tutorials on this YouTube channel. And I think I may have figured out at least part of the problem of why people aren't actually learning these kinds of things, because I noticed this especially with my last video that I did, which was on the void pointers and function pointers that are available to you in the C programming language. Now, what was about people's attitudes towards this video in general? By the way, my opinion is I don't actually think this is necessarily a problem with coding tutorials or even using AI to help you learn. I think this is with people's attitudes towards these resources. Like, of course, some of the tutorials are going to be bad and some of them are going to be good. But let's say if you have a good resource, which is like a 2 hour video that's trying to tell you how to do something, and you come away with that and not learning anything, whose fault is that really? And I think the issue is primarily with people's attitudes towards these videos and how they actually go in with a mindset when they use these videos. So, what was so about my last video and people's attitudes towards that that kind of got me on this path? Well, basically, what I was trying to show is how you can take baby's first linked list example, which you can Google, which I Googled in the first 10 seconds, by the way. And you can essentially just generalize that and add void pointers to it so that you can take in arbitrary data structures. And what I got in the comments of that video, by the way, I had some of the craziest like view to comment ratio on any one of my YouTube videos. And it was essentially everybody was just arguing about the linked list implementation. And it's like, okay, you should do it this way. You should do the linked list this way. This is a bad way to do a linked list. You shouldn't be allocating memory like that. You should be doing this instead. And it's like, okay, so the title of the video was about how to make arbitrary data type helpers in C, and we're all arguing about the implementation of the linked list. Why are we doing that? And why are we not discussing the actual topic of the video, which was supposed to be about how you can build arbitrary data type libraries in C? And I think the problem is that people hyperfixate on the implementation in these coding tutorials. So for example, if you're like learning how to build a Twitter clone, you are hyperfixated on the Twitter clone. Like that's the implementation. That's the thing we're trying to build. We are trying to build a Twitter clone. Or in my video on void pointers, like in that video, I showed off a linked list implementation, and people like hyperfixate on the linked list implementation, and they don't tend to generalize the concepts that we're trying to be taught for a more general purpose thing, if that makes any sense. Let me try and explain that a little bit further. So the point of the video was to show you an example of how you can use void pointers to build an arbitrary data structure library, like where you don't have to care about types. Yet what a lot of people seem to fixate on was the implementation of that in the linked list. Whereas the point of the video is trying to give you an example of how you can use this technique to build something of your own. So really, what I would have preferred people take away from that is nothing to do with the linked list at all. In fact, completely disregard the linked list implementation and instead make the realization that, oh, okay, there's this thing called a void pointer, and I can use it in this way. How else can I use that? Like, that's actually very powerful. I can use this void pointer to take in an arbitrary data type, as this person did in this video with a linked list. Now, what can I use that for in my own projects? Or how would that be useful for this own thing that I'm developing? And it's the same thing, for example, if you try to build a Twitter clone. It's like, okay, in my Twitter clone, what are the building blocks of this Twitter clone? People seem to focus entirely on the output and not on the building blocks that go into it, where it's like, okay, the things that I'm learning in order to do this Twitter clone, how can I use those in my own projects? And I kind of thought about this a little bit, and it's like, whenever I'm starting a new project, what my brain is automatically doing is filling in these building blocks of things that I've already learned. And I think ideally, like, that is what coding tutorials should help you do. Because that's what every software project is. Every software project is a combination of building blocks that you have either discovered yourself, libraries that you've built yourself, or, like realizations about code and that you've made yourself, or they are building blocks that somebody else has taught you, whether that's on YouTube, in university, or even your AI coach. Now, what people don't seem to be able to do is take these Lego bricks and use them to build something of their own. That's what happens when you get stuck in this tutorial hell, where it's like, okay, I can only arrange these Lego bricks one way, and that is the way that this person doing the tutorial has actually shown me. And so, in order to get more out of coding tutorials, you should stop fixating on what the implementation is or what the example is that the person is trying to demo this to you with. And instead, you should focus on what are the building blocks that they are trying to teach me about. And once you change that mindset, you can actually use those building blocks for other things. So it's like, okay, what building blocks go into making a Twitter clone? Well, there's a front end, there's a back end. Okay, that's very high level. Let's dig about it deeper. We're going to have a search algorithm. We're going to have a ranking algorithm. We're going to have a database. We're going to have all of these things. And it's like, okay, now that I know about all these individual components, I can actually take those, combine them in a completely different way, or even throw some out, pull some other ones in from another project, and all of a sudden I've got something unique. And that's kind of what all software projects are like. So if I'm starting something new, my brain is automatically like going through its catalog of Lego bricks at a very high level. Of course, I'm not thinking about the individual code lines that I'm going to be writing yet. I'm simply thinking about the high level architecture. And all of these building blocks that I know about are being rearranged into a solution. And so when you look at coding tutorials, try not to look at them for the output or the thing that you come away with at the end of the day, but instead try and focus on what the person who's doing the demo is trying to teach you about, the actual concepts that go into building the thing that they are building in that example. Don't just try and replicate the example itself, because at the end of the day, if all you can replicate is that one example, you're not going to be very useful to anybody. And so what you have with a coding tutorial, I'll finish up this analogy and then I'll probably end the video because that's kind of all I wanted to talk about, is you can think of it as like a Lego guide. And so when somebody does a demo to you where they show you how to make a clone, or they're trying to teach you about a concept and they use an example, what they're doing is they have this like Lego instruction manual that teaches you how to build the Death Star. Now, what components actually go into building the Death Star? Like, there's individual pages in that Lego manual where it'll teach you how to build like the superstructure. It'll teach you how to build the laser. Like, we'll take that laser and put it somewhere else. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here, is like, and so when I see people arguing about the implementation details of the example, it shows me that they have completely missed the point. And the point is, just think about what I'm trying to demo to you and then extrapolate that outside of this demo to see how that could be useful in your own things. And perhaps it was that the demo that I gave was fairly basic. It was like baby's first linked list, except with void pointers. And that was intentional. That was so that people who have never heard of void pointers before can get in and actually start building things and kind of understand what's happening. Now, the people commenting about the linked list implementation details, I'm not going to try and downplay or belittle their intelligence, because it probably is most likely that they already knew about void pointers, because if you know about those advanced linked list implementations, you kind of already know about void pointers. And in that case, like, the video actually, unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's not really for you. Like, if you already know about the concept, the video is not for you, and the demo is not for you, because you already know about that. And it's kind of counterproductive to just be arguing about the example. If I had titled the example, like if I titled that video, How to Build a Linked List in C, then that is a very appropriate place to be discussing the finer details and different implementations of a linked list. That's like the perfect place to do it, because the explicit purpose of the video is to show you how to build a linked list. But the explicit purpose of that video that I did was to teach people how to make, like, the title of the video was build arbitrary data libraries in C or something like that. So it's like, by arguing about the implementation details of the linked list, that is not really the point of the demo. Anyway, that's kind of just what I wanted to say, is why I think people get stuck in tutorial hell is because they're so focused on the exact example and they're so focused on the output that they fail to break the thing that the person doing the video is trying to teach them about into smaller parts, and they fail to generalize what those parts can actually mean. And so whenever you're trying to start a new software project, what your mind should be doing is kind of like using these Lego bricks that you have learnt about in your mind and, you know, learnt about through like tutorials or books or university or something like that. And you should be trying to figure out how you can rearrange them to make the thing that you want to make. And that's how you get the most out of coding tutorials, is you look at everything as brick by brick. This is what I'm trying to build, and what I'm trying to build in Minecraft is a really ugly house. So please don't go to town on me about that. But, you know, that's what I'm trying to get across, is just don't focus on the implementation details. If you really want to learn, you've got to be building this catalog of Legos in your mind that you can bring software projects together with later on down the line. So that's kind of all I wanted to say about that. It's pretty simple. I just think you need a mindset change. I don't think these coding tutorials are necessarily bad, and I think you can get a lot of value out of them, but you've got to be approaching them the right way. And it's the same thing with like AI assisted coding. Like if you're asking AI, hey, how would I make this project? You know, and the AI is going to spit back a whole bunch of code. It's like, okay, so how did you actually do that? What building blocks did you use to do that? What techniques did you use to build that? That's kind of all I wanted to say. Thanks, guys.